Well, hello all. Sorry for my decor, but we're going to be talking about this shortly. So feel free to let me know when you come on, say hi, and tell me who you are, where you coming from. Hopefully I will find the chat. I have managed, oh look, I found the chat. So let me know where you're coming from. We'll get started here in just 5 minutes. If you're checking this out after the fact and you're on YouTube, fast forward 5 minutes. And so we'll be starting here shortly. Ooh, and I think I found the chat with less hassle this time. And do let me know if you've got any questions. I've got a couple to get us started here, and hopefully I'll either babble endlessly about something or y'all ask great questions as you come on, and I will put them in the queue. Oh, I can type, really. Hey, always the first one here. God, my English is poor today in my typing. There we go. All right. I'm going to be up your way here shortly. I'm coming up to Medicines of the Earth, Black Mountain, so super psyched. I'll get up there Friday or something like that. So I'm going to put in the selfless plug for those people who don't fast forward. Look, the class schedule. Hopefully that's actually showing. I can't see. Oops, there we go. Look, Tradition, School of Herbal Studies. Cool classes. Yeah, after 10 years, I'll be good at this, I'm sure. And cool conference. I believe I've got 3 tickets left. But sorry, that was in my mouth. Good Medicine Confluence in Durango, Colorado. So I actually have discounted tickets, and I totally don't know how much they are, but they're a little bit cheaper than what's online. So I have 3 left. So if anybody wants to go explore Durango with me, I'm teaching a whole crap ton of classes coming up very soon. And I'm looking forward to it. I hear the weather is a trick, and I would say definitely make your reservations there early, because I hear that's a popular place. I was able to find some decent lodging, and I found the easiest way to get there. Well, okay, maybe not the easiest. I shopped around a little bit for where the cheapest airport was to fly in, and I should have booked sooner, and I didn't. But I ended up looking at Denver and then driving down, and then I explored out from there and found that Salt Lake City was actually one of the better prices to fly into. And I believe it's a 6-hour drive from there. But it's through a whole bunch of really cool state and national parks through Utah that I've never explored that state. So I'm totally psyched. And oh yeah, so let us know who you are, where you're from when you sign on. I can't always tell when somebody's on there. It's always hidden. I think they change the Facebook Live every other day. But if any of you are going to be up at Medicines of the Earth, be sure to let me know. We're going to have a gang up there from both the office and as well as from Herb School. And look at that, it's 6 o'clock. I don't know if we got anybody else on here, but I'm going to start babbling. I'm here in the classroom by myself again. If you don't know it, I'm Bob Linde from Tradition School of Herbal Studies and Acupuncture and Herbal Therapies. You can find more out more about us on our website, acuherbals1c.com or traditionsherbschool.com. And this will get archived on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel, which is at the Tradition School of Herbal Studies YouTube channel. So please feel free to share from the YouTube channel if you like, and I encourage you to subscribe. I really looking forward to my trip up to North Carolina here next week, and I am quite sure I'm going to be doing some videos. And if you didn't already hear it, the Good Medicine Confluence is coming up in Durango, Colorado, July. I don't know if those dates are still, they may have added another day on there, so check the website for info. Let's go with the back. There's their website, planthealer.org. They've got tons of information. I understand this is a very different conference than most herb conferences, so it's my first time going. I'm super excited. And we'll have at least a couple of people from the area going. I still have 3 discounted tickets. Contact me by email at traditionsherbschool@gmail.com. And I can get you pricing and get you signed up with all of that. And let me know if anybody's going to Medicine Zeroth in Black Mountain, just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. Although I'm not teaching at that one, it's a fun one. I always look forward to going hiking. We've got a ton of our students going, and I'm sure we're going to have some fun exploring when they're not in classes. And I think for a lot of them, it's their first class. Also, for any of your acupuncturists, I'm going to be, I know I made just a cute video, and I'm going to be working on my handouts. I think I'm teaching 3 classes at FASOMA this year. That's the Florida State Oriental Medicine Association, which is an awesome acupuncture conference. And it's always interesting. I think this year is a non-licensure year that's coming up, so I think they have much more interesting classes on this because they're a little bit more diversity. I'm excited about some of the classes I'm going to be teaching. So I'm going to be working on those handouts, and they just asked me to write an article, so I'm going to work on that this weekend and next. But check out the class list. Obviously, for herbalists, it's less important. The acupuncture classes won't make as much sense, but it's a great way to connect with your vendors and other professionals. And usually there's a good selection of either theory classes or herbal classes. And needless to say, I think I teach there almost every year and always have some interesting herb classes. So it is super appropriate for herbalists to sign up for those programs. I've had a couple of students who've gone to the acupuncture conference as well. And of course, then coming up in October, and I'm sorry I don't have the date, is the American Herbalist Guild Conference is coming up in October up in Maryland. And we've got 2 of the teachers and practitioners from the Tradition School and Acupuncture and Herbal Therapies teaching at this year's AHG conference. So I think Ruth is going to be teaching about cinnamon, everything you ever wanted to know and more. And they could not have picked a better class for me to teach. I'm going to be talking shit up there the entire time. So I get to talk everything about poop, and so the diagnostic significance, and I'm sure I'll put in there a little bit of not only what does our poop tell us, but also some basic approaches when we see particular disharmonies, and we'll take it well beyond the poop charts that most of you have used. I can't believe the name just flew out of my head. And as always, there's lots of good classes coming up here. We won't have another 101. I think my first 101 is coming up in July or August, probably August. And then our next open forum class for anybody who's enjoying jumping on these live is the 24th of June. So that'll be fun. Where do we start tonight? And if you're just joining us, please do feel free to say hey and tell us who you are. Oh yeah, good. We got more people in there. It's so weird. There's different ways to tell how people are on here. So let us know who you are. Please do feel free to type any questions in there if you've got any. And let me know if you're going to be up there for the conference. Oh, and for any of you who are, I'm going to say, in from Gainesville north to maybe central Georgia, I am driving up on Thursday. If you want to put together an herb walk or a class, I would be able to make my timing such that I could teach a class for an organization or a school on Thursday. I know it's short notice, but you never know. Put it out there. I always said I was going to try to do that better. So I'm going to start with the one I got my picture in the opening on this. I don't know if you guys can see this. This is purple Perilla, and this is a Laminaceae. It is so in the mint family. So it's a relative of basil, and this is a classical traditional Chinese medicine or Chinese medicine herb. It is. It's funny. I always compare it to basil. You know, we have things like we've got Italian basil or sweet basil. We've got purple Perilla. I consider that holy basil or Tulsi. And even within the realm of holy basil, we've got like 4 different strains of holy basil. Now we see starting to show up, at least down here in Florida, African tree basil. And I'm sure there's many more besides that. And so they all have some similar properties, and we just have different ways of defining them based on the organization of the group that's using them. And so I usually use the sweet basil as kind of my guidepost. You know, when we say something sweeter than sugar or less sweet than sugar, we always look for some sort of delineation on how do we understand these things. And so I'll use my Italian or sweet basil for that. And sweet basil is just that. It's a little sweetness to it, ever so slightly acrid. Some of those volatile oils in there. And sweet basil, it's funny. It has many things of significance. Considered an aphrodisiac. It helps with stress and digestion. It was also grown in the windows to it could signify anything from a house of prostitution to that there was an available young maiden available. Hey, yay, somebody joined me.
I think that's Bob's truck out there with a
Heck
giant
yeah.
tree in it.
You're already online. So yes, you can totally use any. You could use holy basil, or you can use purple Perilla. Here, you get snacks because you showed up live and in person.
Oh, sure.
So all right,
Cool.
purple Perilla.
Oh, I think I've had this.
Think basil.
Yeah.
So the purple Perilla is interesting. So when Kristen, you sent in the question, shiso is the Japanese name for this, and it was classically added to sushi. And so although you could use it for medicine and it comes in classic Chinese formula, this one is in our medical books. It was added as a flavorant and a digestive aid, and its classical use when combined with ginger was for seafood poisoning and parasites. So the idea that they put pickled ginger, a little wasabi, a nice slap of the purple Perilla on there, they were literally assuming you were going to get poisoning and parasites from eating raw fish, and that they'd better put the antidote in with your food. Luckily, it all tasted good and blends perfectly together. So when we think about, and sorry, I am going to circle back around and talk about the purple Perilla. When we think about the holy basil in the same genus and very similar, I'm going to say a related species, we think of holy basil for stress. It's an adaptogen. It's for tense conditions, and just this really gentle, everybody needs more holy basil, makes everything okay. And it's a little bit more acrid than Italian basil, but not as intense as African tree basil. And so, hey, Joan. So we can see that as we start to get more acrid, we have some benefit for stress. And so if we're talking Western herbal energetics, we're talking about tense conditions. We're talking Chinese herbal medicine. We're talking about qi stagnation. And so I would argue that as we see more acrid, when we see that little bit more of a tickle, more of those volatile oils in there, that we're going to see an increase in its ability to help with stress. So although the purple Perilla is used for seafood poisoning, it's considered a diaphoretic herb. And so that means to release exterior, make you break a sweat. So it's used in colds and flu, in particular where abdominal distension or vomiting, nausea, or sinus congestion is involved, and for cough.
It's getting stuck in my throat.
I know, because it's accurate.
Yeah.
And if we're going to use it, and this is always one of the fascinating things. So often we say, "What's an herb good for?" And all of a sudden you see this laundry list of like 400 different indications, and sometimes they seem contradictory. Like, how can something be an expectorant and a suppressant at the same time? And always the magic is in the dosage. And so if we're going to use this for stress, we use a smaller dosage. If we're going to use it for a diaphoretic, it's not a heavy hitter, so we use moderate to high dosage, depends on the other herbs in a formula. If we're going to use it as an antiparasitic, then we've got to use a much higher dosage, or, and this is where it also gets confusing, a different plant part. So if I say purple Perilla, most people think I mean the leaf, but we also use the seed. And so the seed is better as an antiparasitic, and it's better at abdominal pain and distension. So sometimes we have to search a little bit harder when we do the Google search on these things. The reality is this is a yummy herb. It's a beautiful herb. A little chiffonade of this sprinkled over some pasta where you're doing a little pesto, I think adds a really nice smell, color, and taste. I have made pesto out of this. I want to say I didn't throw it out, but I contemplated throwing it out when I made it only with the purple Perilla. When I did about 2/3 Italian basil and 1/3 this, it actually tasted pretty good. It was cool to have all the purple flecks. I would argue to do the same thing with holy basil as well. The holy basil is similar, except we don't see holy basil used as much for acute illness or the seafood poisoning. This is very specific for seafood poisoning. And yay, you're here in person, so any of y'all can yell out if you got a question, but bonus, you can ask madly as you want to. Oh, I didn't say what the Chinese name for this was. So it is one that's, they're all a little challenging. Zi si ye is the leaf, and the zi si zi is the seed. Yeah, and
The seeds, like you're saying, the seeds are better for the parasite issue.
Yeah.
Is that typical in some seeds? I know the papaya seeds are usually used for that.
That's actually a really great question. So she asked if the seeds in general, even from other plants, were used as an antiparasitic a lot, and yeah. And so not limited to that, but bitter melon's a good example, right? So we've got our Surasy, the bitter melon that grows here on all the fences and hedges and so forth. And you'll see, again, listed for everything, so it's edible, it's disgusting. The leaves are for lowering blood sugar and malaria, and one of the things is antiparasitic and high in lycopene. So if you've ever seen a bitter melon fruit, in the Caribbean one, which is different from the Chinese, even though they're listed kind of by the same Latin name, it's the small orange, like a size of a golf ball, spiky yellow fruit, orange yellow, and when it opens up, it has these red seeds in here. So there's a pulp around the seeds, which is actually sweet. Mm-hmm. So if you eat a bitter melon leaf and then open up the oh, cool. Sorry, questions. Oh, yeah, you can't. I don't know if you can see those. So if you suck the pulp off of those, that's high in lycopene and helps with male prostate hyperplasia. It also takes away the disgusting bitter taste of the leaf. The seeds, I always tell people to spit out because the seeds will cause cramping explosive diarrhea, i.e. parasitic. Yeah. And if you crush the seeds, they're slightly toxic as well, which is good if you're trying to expel, crappy worms. Yeah. And when we look at bitter melon, it's generally used for intestinal parasites, and it is important. Is it a blood parasite, a liver parasite? So looking at the type of parasite also is important. And when we're working with antiparasitics, looking at life cycle. how fast does it reproduce, because we usually dose on and off to make sure we get the babies as well. And if it's something like a tapeworm, where it attaches onto the intestinal wall, killing it's not enough, because then you leave the body in there. So you have to actually get a relaxant in there like kava to make it let go.
Okay.
And then a something like Jamaican dogwood. There's a bunch of other weird ones, and then an expellant, something to push the bodies out.
Okay.
So it's parasites. Like, I know everybody does a parasite cleanse. It's like, no, it's not that easy. You got to know what kind of parasite.
Yeah, how would you know? Like, is there tests that?
Yeah, usually.
Is it blood one or whatever?
Yeah, poop test
Yeah.
is the most common one to do, and you can send those out. Even blood work will give you hints at it. If you have really high on your CBC, complete blood count, it'll show EOS or eosinophils. And if those are really out of range, that can be either parasites or allergies, one of the two.
Okay.
And then look at your poop. If you see wiggly things, you got parasites. If you have pets, dogs and cats being the most common, of course, is get your flashlight at like 2 o'clock in the morning when they're sleeping. If you see little grains of rice coming out of their butt, that's probably one of the most common ones, is pinworms. They come from the soil. Little kids get pinworms all the time. They're eating dirt, and if you're sleeping with your pets, which we all do, and if your pet has pinworms, you got them too. My personal, I like the gentlest, kindest one for pinworms and very, very effective is epazote, which is a Florida native.
Okay.
You can buy it in any of the ethnic sections of Publix. You can find it in any of the Latin American food stores. Epazote is a good spice, as well as like my go-to for two-legged and four-legged pinworm issues. It's a fun one. Yay! I get Chinese questions today too. For Jingqi and Shen. Sorry, I got it right here. In meditation. Okay. Ooh, you got some cool question. I don't think I've been asked that one before. So we got to go a little bit of a circle here. So the question was, can you talk about usage of herbs to support the Jingqi and Shen in meditation practices? And so now, first we have to identify what are Jingqi and Shen. So they, can you see the chat?
I can see it.
Oh, okay, cool. So Jingqi Shen, that's 3 words. And so those are called the 3 treasures. The best example I've ever seen of it is they're all kind of the same thing. They're all types of chi or energy, but they're in different states. And so I know when I used to teach about it, being the science nerd that I am, I was like, the 3 states of water, of ice and liquid and steam that can exist, and nobody knew what the hell I was talking about. It's a physics thing. And so I thought that actually the director of the Florida State Oriental Medicine Association, Ellen Teeter, had the best example I'd ever seen. She lit a candle. And so the solidified wax is the Jing. It's very dense and solid. The liquid wax and is more about the Qi, and the flame itself is the Shen. And Jing is frequently referred to as the stuff we're born with. So genetics. If your mom and dad didn't live that long, and even though they weren't like doing anything crazy, you could be the most perfect person in the world. You're not going to make it more than a few years past whatever they lived. If your folks both lived into their 90s and were healthy as a horse, you could probably do all kinds of stupid things and still make it into your 90s. And so genetics plays a huge role into not just our health, but the quality of our health. Obviously, genetics also having, like, you get an extra head off your shoulder, you're going to have a hard time. Your qi, and there are 3 sources of qi. The air we breathe, called qing qi, and that determines some of our day-to-day health. Obviously, Without air, we don't make it. But the quality of our air has a huge impact on our health. We see rates of autoimmune disorders and asthma and skin issues in major cities, like whether it's Beijing or LA or New York, because of the pollution rates, because the air they're breathing is crappy. And they're less common, out in the mountains. The food we eat is obviously matters. And so if we're not eating or eating poor quality of food, then our spleen chi or our digestive chi becomes weak, and that's thought to be our day-to-day chi. And then kidney chi, but that's Jing, it's the same thing. And so genetics is hard to change. The air we breathe, you could move, but other than that, you're kind of stuck with wherever you live. And so the thing we have the greatest impact on is our food. And as a part of that, back into your question, are herbs, and that we can help to work just to improve our immune system, our digestion, through the herbs that we use. And the question is, how do we use those to help with our meditation? And we sometimes go a little bit further afield, and there's a mix of East and West that's good for that. So with every organ in Chinese medicine, we attach a spiritual idea to it. We see with the heart is the Shen, and that is your mental health. We see if your Shen is disturbed, we actually see things like schizophrenia, bipolar. We might see anxiety and sleep disturbance. In the case of if your spleen or your digestion was messed up, that is your Yi, Y-I. And if the spleen's messed up, your ability to digest your food is off, and your immune system may be compromised. But your ability to digest information is challenged. And so with the Yi, we put the intelligence. So you might be able to read, but if you don't understand what you read, then you're challenged. And we all see when we're in college, or when, we all go too much pizza and beer, we want all the sweet things, we associate the flavor sweet. And with the kidney, where we see the Jing associated, it's the Zhi, and that has a lot to do with the function of the brain. We see its role in memory, because Jing is our ancestral knowledge, i.e. Genetics. Our ability to remember our past is then based in that, but the stomach and the spleen is important to understand it. With the lungs, so our air that we breathe is the closest to our Judeo-Christian kind of soul. That's our Po. And then our Hun we associate with the liver. And there's a huge amount of debate as to what some of these things do. Obviously, it's not that concrete. With the Hun, and it's associated with the liver, we say the liver is, we see some emotional states, depression, irritability, anger. We see that it controls the tendons and our flexibility. And so not our ability to touch our toes only, but also our flexibility to change and stress is about our Hun. It's also courage, as well as our ability to make decisions. Whereas the kidney or the Zhi helps us with our willpower to keep it up. The Hun or our liver or our gallbladder gives us the courage to enact and make the decision. And most of us are smart enough, like, don't smoke, it's bad for you. No shit. We don't usually have to work on that too much. So the question that often gets, the spleen is more worry. Oh, hey, John. Like, I got to look and see who's saying that. So yeah, the kidney would be helpful with our willpower and will provide stability so we don't overthink or worry too much. Um, and for anybody who wants to explore this more, you can find, I think, on YouTube, Giovanni Maciocia has a wonderful explanation. He's a brilliant writer. He's not a dynamic speaker, but he has a brilliant YouTube video on Shen Hun Po that I actually enjoy immensely. Um, so the question then has to always go back to, if we're going to do meditation in order to support the qi, I would say qigong, diet, and some gentle, moderate meditation. But more moving meditation is going to be more beneficial. But most people are doing meditation for other reasons. Um, Meditation, if we are doing meditation, and meditation being a part of qigong or qi exercise, is used to strengthen the jing, your essence, your longevity of life. Some people do it for enlightenment. Some people do it to understand or to change behaviors. So the herbs we might select would be based on what our intention of getting out of our meditation would be. Um, and some people, if you're looking to be healthier, then it would be truly unique based on the individual, because what's your imbalance? If you're super tense and I'm super lax, then we both want to meditate, we're going to need different herbs. And so that really, it's so easy to just say the sound bite, like, here, burn some mugwort, you'll rock. It's like, yeah, you'll have really cool dreams, but that's different. Um, so I'm gonna say that with every organ we have a flavor. So we have sweet with the spleen, with the yi. We have salty with the kidney. Bland, and we put it accurate a little bit in the right dosage for the lung, the po. For the liver, we look at. I assume this has nothing to do with this, but you never know. With the nope, it doesn't. With the liver, we look at sour, and I would argue I like to mix my metaphors. I actually think the Chinese do it, but they wanted it to fit the system. In Western herbal medicine, sour certainly does affect the liver, but we look to bitter when we want to affect it. And so I agree wholeheartedly with that. And then the Chinese will put bitter with the heart. So there are certainly herbs that help with dreaming, and a lot of people associate those herbs with meditation. I personally don't want to be drifting off to sleep if I'm trying to, accomplish something with my meditation. So, if it's a state of relaxation, a minor buzz, you can look at things like mugwort, Aye in Chinese, Artemisia vulgaris. There we go. You can look at reishi mushroom, the mushroom of enlightenment and immortality, and that one's very subtle. I actually like that one. We can look at any number of other nootropics like skullcap, blue vervain, but each one of those is going to depend on the individual. And so blue vervain, I'm not that uptight and I don't do lists. So it's like, yeah, it doesn't do anything for me. I happen to like reishi. I would say any of your anxiolytics, anti-anxiety herbs like kava kava, any of your adaptogens, the things that help you adapt to stress. And so if we were specifically working on the jing or the kidney, we might want to strengthen the kidney in order to have the resolve or the will in order to sit in the meditative practices. And a lot of those are things like ginseng and romania and so forth. Well, there's a hard question. my God. You're killing me with that one. I'll come back to that. Put that one on hold because I don't have a good answer for that. B. No, I'm just teasing. So I think a lot of times when, there's different concepts of meditation. I prefer moving meditation. The stillness is probably what I need to do better. But oftentimes I feel meditation, the way it's sometimes talked about, is to separate us from our surroundings, that we empty our mind and we go inward. I think we all live in our heads and are crazy as loons. And so we don't need that. I think that sometimes we're disconnected, and certainly COVID and our cell phones doesn't help us at all with any of that. So that idea that to reconnect with nature. So I frequently, yes, it was, Efren. Totally. I was like, holy crap. Maybe I'll let somebody else type that in. I was like, I don't even know where to go with that one. It's an awesome question. So the idea that connection with nature, and so if we're working on Jing, if we're working in the realm of the kidney or the jur, that is the water element. And so we said salty is the flavor. I tell people to go sit by the ocean. Put your feet in the water, and the kidney meridian starts in the bottom. So literally kidney 1 connected to the earth will help you feel more connected and grounded. We can put in the modern term of earthing, whatever. If you're working on the liver, that we want to work on our constraint and we're feeling depressed and isolated, that can oftentimes be the wood element, the liver. And so sitting under a tree, an oak tree in particular. Hey, Ashton, feel free to type in any questions you got. That actually, it's funny, one of the things we take our senior students to do is we take them on a camping trip just for 24 hours. That's an advanced stuff for you. Not yet. And we do a number of activities, but it culminates on the second day with me placing them out with a plant or a tree to sit with. And it's very, very common for me to sit people with trees and not just some random weed out in the dirt. And I'd say a third of them come back in tears because it reminds them of so much, and it makes them feel grounded and whole. And so my idea of what meditation ought to be, and other people's, or the more common things, I'm like, kind of a different answer. So feel free to elucidate on that if you want. But I think that kind of, and I will say, I do like Bacopa and Gotu Kola for that role. In our easily distracted society, where it is challenging to be present, to do things like meditation. Oh, cool. I did not know that. Didn't. I always identified with being more Taoist anyway, so that's cool. The Bacopa and Gotu Kola help with focus, but also cause a state of relaxation that allows you to be present. And there's an argument of which organ association we might even put those with, but our ability to be present, I think, gets harder and harder the more we have, an endless connection to our cell phones and computers. Yay, I get to talk to all of y'all. But, oh, thank you, Tabitha. Yeah, we had a really good trip with everybody out there. That was one of the better camping trips, I think. And John, yours kicked ass, but we added new shit in since you did it. So yeah, I'm gonna shorten that by saying it really just depends on the individual of what do we need to balance, and I don't feel like you always have to ingest an herb. A lot of times when we look at meditation, spiritual enlightenment, things like that, people start talking about hallucinogens, mushrooms, ayahuasca, all the other interesting things that are available for us, and more available to us. And I grow a number of those plants and I don't ingest them. I actually find that sitting with those plants, that idea of tree practice, if you will, sitting with those plants can be just as profound. And our practice is in creating that communication. There's sorry, you never know where these conversations go. I love it. The and I'm not going to tell the whole story because I'm not authorized to tell the story, but I will say that according to many traditions, but the Cherokee in particular, there used to be one language, and obviously we see that in some other Judeo-Christian religions as well, that there was a shared language that we could all understand each other. And for many of the Cherokee, for the other traditional tribes, that included that our ability to talk with all of the animals as well as the tree and so forth, that everything and what we, beyond even what we would call living entities, so they would call a river a living entity, they would call a rock a living entity and so forth. And that humans got full of themselves. And so we decided we were going to have our own language, that we didn't need to talk to these lower animals. And so we started to take advantage of that, and we stopped giving the proper respect for all of the other things that lived on the earth. And so the first thought was that some of the animals, the insects, and a few of the other ones were like, hey, we got to get rid of these idiot humans. They're a pain in the butt, and they're not being respectful. Theoretically, according to Cherokee tradition, it was Father Ginseng that said, you know what, there's some good humans out there too, and we should make sure that we provide for those humans that come to us in the right way. And I would say meditation is a part of that. So if we want to learn both from a physical medicine standpoint, but also from a spiritual medicine standpoint, it is about creating ceremony around and sitting with and trying to relearn the language so that we can talk to all of the other entities that are around us. And so it's like, yeah, my idea of meditation is so different. A walk in the woods for me is always a meditation. I'll say one of my favorite things that we get a lot of people. It's so common how often we see people who are so caught up in the minutia of life that they forget to live, and they forget to literally, we have the term, stop and smell the roses, right? And so, well, isn't that a cute phrase? We don't grow roses in Florida very often. But I'll literally, for my very intense, very type A folks, and, if you say, hey, you're really tight, you need to find some time to do some exercise. Like, I recommend going for a walk. And how long do I have to walk for? Which direction, and what pulse rate, those are that very intense, very controlling of everything. And so for those folks who are like, don't want to just go for a walk, I tell them you have to find 3 flowers, different ones, on your hike and smell them. And and then you can add in 30 minutes or so and so forth. The other one is the folks, it is, I think giving is a beautiful thing, and, that I do this, I 2 freaking hours once a month, I'm giving y'all, all of my knowledge that I can think of. But some people do it too much and to their detriment, where, and I used to have that disorder, where everybody would come to you first and ask for help, and you felt obligated to always say yes. And so there's a Qigong exercise that's part of 8 pieces of brocade called looking back. And it's very simple. You turn your head and you turn your eyes. The eyes exercise the liver, doesn't matter. And so I was like, okay, here's your exercise. Learn to say no. It's okay. People still like you when you say no, And I literally, I used to work at USF, ran the recreation department. I volunteered for everything. They would come to me for everything. And I came to the realization it was killing me. And the first time I told somebody no, they literally were shocked on their face. And then they were like, oh, okay. And I was like, I reserve the right to say yes, but just assume my answer is no. And all of a sudden, the job got so much better. Hey, Melly. All right. Let's go. So I learned one, I love it. Some of these questions I'm like, hell, I don't know. I wish I knew everything. Um, so one of our regular question givers, and I know her and I know her husband, and he's a workaholic. And I can't say that with a bad tone because I'm a workaholic. So birds of a feather. But I guess he's got a new gig, and it's really causing a lot of problems, some health issues, and overworking and not taking time for yourself, not exercising, not eating right. All of a sudden, you can get away with that when you're 20. It starts to hurt. You get older. So you really have to settle down a little bit and prioritize with a lot of this stuff. And in his case, I'm sure it's showing up in some other ways as well, but in tinnitus. And so when we see tinnitus, there are many causes for it, and I'm going to cheat and use Chinese medicine here on this one. Tinnitus has a variety of different causes. It can be anything from certain medications cause it, like aspirin can cause tinnitus. Certain antibiotics can cause it. High blood pressure can cause tinnitus. Too much rock and roll can cause tinnitus. And it's funny, I'm seeing it in younger and younger stuff where we got our earbuds in. And so it's forcing the ear in onto the eardrum, and people are cranking it up because they're playing their own tunes, and it's really fun. It's funny, I remember the first concert I ever went to, I parked right next to the wall of speakers, and I could barely hear for 3 days and had tinnitus for 3 days. So it was horrid. And for folks who are, firing guns, working heavy machinery, that's the same as listening to rock and roll. In his case, it's probably a little bit of all of those. And so she asked my opinion about using melatonin for that. And honestly, I had never heard of using melatonin for that. So I had to go and research it. I've never used melatonin for that. But when I went on PubMed and found a couple of very small studies, they were very positive outcomes. So I'm going to say, heck yeah, use that crap. And they generally were looking at a dosing of 3 milligrams at night for folks with tinnitus for at least 30 days, and then stop taking it to see how they responded. And it's melatonin's a very not well understood hormone. It's made in our pineal gland. It helps us recognize our sleep wake cycle. So like if you're traveling between time zones, I recommend it. If you a nurse or a paramedic, firefighter, where you're like you work the night shift for a few days and then they shift you back, and which is just cruel and unusual. If you're working the second or third shift, so you get weird, it's a nice way to get yourself back onto a more normal sleep schedule. I have no idea why it works for tinnitus, but it seemed to be helpful. Earbuds that work through vibration. Ooh, I have no idea. I don't have a good answer for that, Tabitha. I've never heard of that. It potentially could. If you're still hearing it as sound, sound is a weird thing. You've got little tiny microscopic bones in your ear, and the auditory nerve, where they're basically receiving these vibrations and sending them through to this nerve. Obviously, if it's not in your ear and you're hearing it as normal sound through vibration, it's still doing the same thing. I'm pretty sure. And so you can get inflammation on the, the stirrup and whatever the other, cool, there's 3 of them. So either the body is going to turn the volume down for you, and so that's a shutting off of the auditory nerve, or they'll calcify, or the nerve becomes inflamed, or some part of that gets inflamed, and then we get the tinnitus. It's kind of the same idea of cayenne pepper for killing pain. doesn't kill pain. It's like pouring fire onto your arm, and your body goes, "Oh my God, your arm's on fire. We better shut off those nerve sensations." So it's a counter irritant. So if we play too much loud noises, our ears literally will go, "Ooh, I got to turn that volume down," and so it will shut off the function of that auditory nerve. So I'd be like, "No, it's fine. Just don't crank it up too high." So melatonin, I'm going to say I'm going to start experimenting with. I don't have tinnitus, but I don't have a reason not to, and it does raise the question of, is it okay to take a hormone? Because it is a hormone, just it's not a sexual hormone like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. So I don't think it's good to take it long term. A lot of people obviously take it for sleep. It has short-term benefits for sleep, but not long-term benefits for sleep. It's also used in very high dosages in certain types of cancers. And I don't usually take that approach, but it is a naturopathic thing, and it does show some value to it. And I do tend to use herbs. There's two different ways to look at it. We can create a formula that's kind of specific. I usually will add in gotu kola, Centella asiatica. I've recently been looking at Punarnava, whose Latin name totally, it's an Ayurvedic herb that grows wild here that is got some research using that for tinnitus. There's Chinese formulas that are specific for tinnitus. What I find is the herbs either work or they don't. You'll either see benefit within a few weeks, or you're like, I got nothing. The ones that are hardest to fix are the rock and roll ones. When it's drug induced, when it's high blood pressure, those are fix the blood pressure, and it's better. So it is always important with any of these things, like tinnitus is a symptom of something that's out of balance in the body and trying to fix the underlying cause. The other one that I find is Sanjiao or triple burner, the acupuncture point. And there's 2 points. There's Sanjiao 5 and 6 are basically right next to each other. If you go on the lateral side of your arm, from your wrist crease, 4 fingers right between your radius and ulna, the 2 bones there, there's probably like a little hollow spot. That point is a crazy effective point for stuff. I use that for everything from migraines, headaches, tinnitus. Yeah, those are the biggies. And that one, you can stimulate that with pressure. You can stimulate that with magnets. If you're an acupuncturist, put a sharp object in there. Essential oils with a carrier oil. Any number of different ways that can be used. Moxibustion, which is burning of mugwort over the acupuncture points. Any of those are super effective.
Someone at one point told me that the melatonin affects like male testosterone. Is that like a thing?
I haven't seen it affect testosterone. I think short term it's totally fine. I've never seen it cause a problem. Long term,
Anything long term might not be a good choice. Yeah.
and it's, it's funny. There's another way to think about it, and it's the problem. Anecdotal medicine is important. Like, it's like, no, I've had this success. I tell y'all, you go test it, and like that's anecdotal medicine. There's no good, double-blind placebo-controlled study. And a lot of Western and Chinese medicine, it's all anecdotal. I actually kind of spit when I think about research, because it's like it doesn't. You can't research a formula and an energetic diagnostic system. But if you're not sleeping well and you have chronic insomnia, all of your hormones are jacked. Like your cortisol is building up, testosterone's likely declining, the DHT, the dehydrotestosterone is probably screwed up. And so what are you going to do? You're going to take melatonin. One of the many things, it's, you go to the CVS, they're going to say, try some melatonin. And so you try it, and you're like, and then you get your testosterone checked, and you're like, oh, I'm screwed. It must be the melatonin. So it's kind of like, and I don't know. I would have to literally go and probably ask Trisha. No.
Yeah.
But it is, hormones are one of the hardest things, I think. Not that hormones are hard, like, oh, we know this one does that one does that. When we put all of them into the body and go, oh, let's see what happens, because like your digestive system has literally dozens of hormones, the ghrelin and there's a bunch of other ones in there that are just the signaling for everything under the sun. And how do they interact? Who knows? And so you also asked about ground ivy. Ground ivy is a weird. I won't say. The starting dosage is 3 milligrams at night, and they did that for 30 days. I'm sure you could go up, but most of the research I saw was 3 milligrams. So ground ivy, for whatever reason, I believe that's a very English or European one. I haven't worked, I wouldn't say never, I've worked with it occasionally. And it has a wide range of things that it's used for. And everything from cancer to tinnitus to digestive issues to, I think I said arthritis, lung issues. And the way I think about it is it's cooling and helps with the lymphatic system and has a affinity to the upper body. So think from your diaphragm up for wet conditions and excessive wet conditions. So if you're prone towards a lot of earwax, congested eustachian tubes, you're always clearing all the crap out of there, and you have tinnitus, that case, the ground ivy would probably be helpful. Ground ivy, you have to make sure you're getting the right one. Not every ivy is the same. And it's cooling and drying, and I think that's a really important distinction. Because if everybody runs out and says, oh wait, Bob said ground ivy was good for tinnitus, I'm like, I've never actually used it for that. I have used it as an upper body lymphatic for lung issues. It's a go-to for lung cancer, chronic bronchitis, things like that. Just an accumulation of crap in your lungs. People trying to stop smoking, I find it helpful.
I've used it for bronchitis.
Oh, okay.
I had that.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Oh, that's really cool, Ephraim. Ooh, I gotta see the rest of that. You know, it's a trick. Ah, I see. You're looking for a lineage. Now that question makes more sense to me. No, that's awesome. It totally makes sense. Did you study with the tiaras? Because it's funny. I did. I shouldn't say that. When I was in acupuncture school, I was married at the time, and my wife was doing their correspondence course, so I kind of like sat over her shoulder and did it and sat in all the chats. So it was really great. So I would start with when for anybody who's looking to explore, like, no, I want to learn herb stuff, and there is, for better or worse, there are 1,000 different avenues you can go, from being, read every book that's available, do all kinds of crazy webinars like this, to formal teaching, going to a school like we've got here. Tiara's, I think he has both in-person and correspondence. Jim McDonald, there's so many wonderful people out there. And sometimes it's like, well, I live in the middle of nowhere. I don't have any ability to move, so I'm doing correspondence or I'm going to learn on my own. And that's super appropriate. And I don't think there's one way that's better than another. But for folks who are looking for a lineage, you're somewhat limited. And it's funny, every school, I would say, whoever your teacher is, that is your lineage. And I don't think of myself as some guru, but my graduates, I'm proud of them. I give them my seal of approval, and I hope that they succeed. And, folks, I know John's on here, hopefully, that, I know he loves teaching. He is such a mentor. And so for teachers, they're usually proud to see students progress, and that creates a lineage. Some people have a very distinct lineage. Rosemary Gladstar, it's frequently the wearing the moons, is a mark of her lineage. And there's an interesting story. I emailed Rosemary a couple of months ago and told me the story of it. It was really a gift from one of her students that gave her the moon, and she thought it was so beautiful and significant that she created that lineage. And even though she's not giving out I don't think she's giving out the moons anymore, she said that anybody who has a moon has the right to provide those moons. When you look at David Winston, and my running joke is my herbalist man crush on David. Okay. Oh wow, 4 years with Paul. Yeesh. That was probably intense. David Winston, I'm a huge fan of, and he has again an eclectic lineage, because he had, I think, over 13 years of formal training from his uncle in Cherokee medicine, tradition, songwriting, all of it, and he also studied under, I believe it was Master Eng in New York, who taught him Chinese medicine, and then through his own research. Oh, and I think he also studied with Michael Moore, who's passed away, out in New Mexico, and then also his own studies in the eclectics. So his lineage is unique, but it's again a hodgepodge. It's funny. I didn't talk about lineage enough in my past, and I've started to put a better emphasis on that. But again, mine is so eclectic. There's not a straight line lineage, because one of my informal teachers was when I was a teenager down in the Bahamas, from a conch fisherman I was working with, Noel Boodle, and he's passed away. So I think Chinese medicine has used to have more clear lineage, and there are definitely people to study under if you gravitate to that. If you gravitate to Ayurvedic medicine, you're going to find very specific teachers within that realm. I love Vasant Lad out in, I forget whether he's in Texas or California. I did one weekend intensive with him. I thought the man was brilliant. And so I would say it's not so much as to be able to recite a lineage, as so much as to find the right teacher. And whether you get a symbolism of that, be proud of, and Paul Pritchford, I'm going to assume you know a lot, and that, you're proud to be one of his students, especially 4 years of that, but don't limit yourself to a teacher. I think every teacher would tell you to go learn from everyone else, because it is, although we want to have a focus, I love my Chinese medicine for its diagnostics, but I like my bioregional herbs because I want to be able to walk out my backyard and find my medicine. So it really, really is kind of clarifying who you are as an herbalist, who you want to be as an herbalist, and then finding the teachers that will best lead you down that path. And I don't know how long you've been on here. I kind of started it, and it's usually my station of identification. Going to conferences is a great way to do that, because I'm here to tell you we don't make any money going teaching at conferences. There's a bunch of weirdos who like to teach. They give us a couple $100 that covers our, maybe if you're lucky, your travel or your room. Usually not enough for both. But it's a way for us to, I hate to say this, advertise for students, right? So, we've got a school. But it's also for an opportunity for the students to explore a range of different teachers, to see if you like what they have to say, whether you agree with it, whether you like their teaching style or not. because it's not I'm sure, I cuss sometimes in class. Oh no, and I'm not always a linear thinker, and that can be really frustrating for some folks. And some people want to go play out in the woods with Seven Song, and most of his stuff is out in the woods, and they become, oh yeah, oof. Yeah, I love him. I don't know how good of an herbalist is, but as a teacher, I think he's brilliant. So I'm going to say I'm going to Medicines of the Earth, which is in North Carolina in Black Mountain, is next weekend. Very Western focused in there. Donnie Yance's Hurts My Brain. He teaches the what the heck? I forget Donnie Yance's system, the triphasic something or another. Um, this one is coming up in Durango. There we go. Good Medicine Convergence in July. I've never been to this one before, but I think I'm teaching like 5 classes. I'm super excited about it. You can find out more at the planthealer.org. I do have 3 tickets available for that are cheaper than what's online. Yay. And ooh, I'm getting like tons of questions. I love it. I'm going to have to keep up with those. And we've got lots of cool classes coming up. And you can find out more on traditionsherbschool.com. Go to our YouTube page, Tradition School of Herbal Studies, to learn more stuff, or for the clinical practice, acuherbals.com. All right, now back to the cool shit. Uh, yeah, that's messed up, Efren. It's tough. Like David. I don't even know if he's going to continue to teach. I really enjoyed going to acupuncture school and learning. I was lucky all my teachers were PhDs from China. So finding a school that, if you want the formal master's degree kind of thing, even if you don't care about the acupuncture, the system is brilliant. No, linear thing. Yes, no. Linear rather than lineage. Sorry. And I'm just babbling about the folks that are in the U.S. Obviously, there's some overseas as well. We took a couple students over to the Scottish School of Herbalism a while back. Very different system of learning, and it's always funny. Every culture, every nation, those aren't always the same, has their own things. Like most of the Europeans use way lower percentages of alcohol for their tinctures than Westerners. And so it's just like, and you know what? Both the medicines work. So it's like there's not. It is sometimes the problem with lineage is that it gets very. It doesn't allow for the creative thought sometimes that the complexity of human illness sometimes requires. Like I use both Chinese and Western, so it's always a trick. All right, Bacopa. Oh, nice. So Tammy, let me babble about Bacopa a little bit. Boy, I don't usually get to talk all the cool stuff here. Bacopa is, I'm going to say, make sure you have the right plant. Hopefully you got it from me or somebody else. And I've noticed there's a few plant nurseries around that are selling something that they list as Bacopa mononeri. I don't even know what it is. I don't know what genus it is, but it ain't Bacopa. Bacopa does grow wild here. We can find it all over Florida. It's generally in full sun and in wet feet. So you'll find it in less than 6 inches of water. In both standing water, like in a lawn in the low spot, you'll find Bacopa, to a slow-moving river, and it can even handle a little bit of brackishness, a little salt water in it. Not on the salt water, but the creek behind my house is tidal, and there's like tons of it. It especially here in Florida, unless you're like out in some pristine swamp somewhere picking it, it's frequently picking up all kinds of creepy chemicals. So when I harvest Bacopa, I will get the freshest parts. I'll grow those in a pot and then cut the fresh growth and transfer that to a new pot, and then after it's grown for a while, I'll use that becomes my mother plant, and then I'll eat off of those. Um, all that said, it is a disgusting plant. It can be used fresh or dried. It can be it's funny. I was at a FASOMA conference, the Florida State Oriental Medicine Association conference. Oh, okay. If you got an herb conference, you should be good. I always get worried when people are like just getting it from the store. Um, there was an Ayurvedic guy there, and I had a big old pot of Bacopa that I was just using for display, and I was like, I was that guy. I was like, tell me what you know about this, and he was like, he got so excited because a lot of times when we're used to like here we've got Bidens everywhere. Well, outside of the tropics, you don't see Bidens. And so, like, for me to like be in North Carolina and all of a sudden see Bidens, I would get super excited. Um, and so I asked, like, how did you use this? And it was specifically used because Bacopa is a nootropic, and so it helps with focus and memory, but it has a relaxation aspect to it. So there's an anti-anxiety part to it. And so his mother would grind up a teaspoon of it fresh, like just mash it into a spoon and make him eat it before he went to school, so that he would be focused and sit still in his chair. So, the kids aren't any different in India than they are here. They're fidgety in their chairs and they don't want to sit still and pay attention. Yeah, and it's disgustingly bitter. So I've tried that. I didn't like it, and I prefer Gotu Kola. I like it paired with Gotu Kola, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Super appropriate to tincture it. You don't need any special, like you can do a low tincture. Very normal to make a strong infusion with it. So if you want to dry a bunch of it or fresh, you could, if you're doing fresh, you could muddle it and then pour hot water on it, let it steep, longer, stronger. You could do it dried. It's totally appropriate to use it dried as well. Um, I always think of the Bacopa as more cooling and moistening, and better for Pitta personality type if we're looking at the Ayurvedic. Whereas the Gotu Kola is more drying and is a little bit better for the Kapha, and you could argue for uh, Vata, but I see some sources say the Gotu Kola is better for Vata, some that say the Bacopa is better for Vata. And I think you got to throw both of them that crap out there. Um, it, I don't. So the Ayurvedic guy I saw at that conference, he was like never past 2 p.m. He was quite adamant about that. And so even though it has a relaxant aspect, that hyper focus property of it, I generally discourage people from doing that, and I will combine it in formula with the Bacopa and the Gotu Kola, based on like how wet or dry they are. And I like Gotu Kola better for inflammation. And so I think that's one of the reasons why Gotu Kola works so well as a nootropic. We use it for connective tissue inflammation. And so if we have a brain inflammation, the meninges or something covering the brain, and that's causing disruptive behavior, inability to focus, that if we can reduce that inflammation. So I really like at least doing, I always err because I'm phlegmy, so I need more Bacopa. I need more Gotu Kola. I always end up adding a little bit more in there. But the nice thing about the Bacopa, like any old way is fine. It's easy to grow. It does need full sun. It does not like cold. And you can do it in a hanging pot. You can put it in the ground if you got a wet spot or a pond. The pond at the back of the clinic, it's not invasive, but it's like I have to hack that stuff back. It is so aggressive a grower in a pond. And also, if you search for it in the waterways here, Bacopa will grow on wet soil. about 4 or 5 inches into the water, there is, and it's the problem with common names, there's another herb called water hyssop that will grow in deeper water, that will only grow in like 6 inches or deeper water, that when you crush it, it will have a minty scent to it. And that's very different. That's a good digestive, but not a good nootropic, help with stuff. Um, oh, yeah. It's funny. Yeah. I love Rosenberg. I've read a lot of his stuff. I haven't read anything much recently. You know, it's funny. There is a whole system of Judaic herbal practices and spiritual practice that I wish I could say I knew stuff. And it was probably from him that he would frequently comment on some of the groups and so forth. Um, that was very reminiscent to me about some of the Ecuadorian practices of using bird eggs in a lot of the ceremonies that, in Ecuador and a lot of cultures, we look at ritual bathing, the limpia in South America. And there's egg limpias where you literally, I think it was dove or pigeon eggs that if I remember right, in the Judaic practices of that. But where you literally wipe somebody down with the egg and then dispose of it. But it's important to always recognize that every single culture has an herbal tradition, and sometimes we differentiate it sometimes by tribe. We base it on a continent, European medicine, American medicine. Sometimes there's Hallelujah Acres that's inland a little bit that bases it on the Bible, that they use all the biblical references in there. We have Judaic, there's Persian medicine. It's all of those are based on the bioregional stuff, and it is frequently, as you go deeper into any of these, there's a mysticism that goes back to where we see that the religious belief system and the plant medicine are ultimately inseparable. And we see that I've spent a lot of time in South America working with various people down there, and you don't just give it for a chronic complex. You don't just throw some herbs at them, tell them to make some tea, and have a nice day. You have to have the spiritual practices. The idea of separating the physical, the spiritual, and the emotional, metaphysical is crazy. That we have a rabbi or a priest, but those don't talk to the psychiatrist, and those certainly aren't. Neither one of those is talking to an MD. The idea that we should separate those into separate entities is a little crazy talk. And so I would say, and that might help you, Efren, to find your direction. So you can look at it through belief systems, religious belief systems, that there is separations within the herbal traditions, and they're all the same. Ultimately, they use different funny words. That you can look at it on tribal groups, and so the Judeo tribal group, we have all the Native Americans here, the Central South American, those are all tribal groups, and we can look at more national lines, but if we're talking Celtic medicine, that's just a tribal group. So it's always a trick, and it is about finding the tribe, if you will, that most resonates with you. And here in the United States, especially because we're such a weird hodgepodge, although I'm just a good German guy, it's like, but most of us are mutts, and even if we can say my ancestry goes back to Germany, literally, I can go back. I did the 23andMe, and I'm like, the last 40,000 years, we never left Neander Valley. There's like 5% of scattered stuff that's part of the family stories. It's like, no, I stayed right there. But most of us are this hodgepodge. But as the global world becomes more less defined, and certainly here in the United States, where most of us are transplants in some form or fashion, that we've lost our tribal or cultural identity. And I think that's why we see so many people seeking it out to try to find their tribe. And so sometimes that is through religion, sometimes that is through being adopted into other tribes, or, in some cases creating their own, and that's okay too. And so it is always a trick to find that path. And I'm full of myself, so I kind of create my own path that is ultimately that hodgepodge of various systems. Because if any of you I don't always remember to mention that I have a TV series in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, so I apologize. That I did in South America, in Ecuador, and I got to visit with various healers, and I kind of went down there with the intention of proving a premise that all of the herbal traditions, when we look at the traditions, and that excludes research based, because that's not a tradition, that's research, that's science. So when we look at all these different systems, they are based on energetic systems of evaluation. And Chinese might say qi, blood, yin, yang, qi stagnation, blood stagnation, and phlegm. Those can be translated fairly easy into the tense, lax, wet, dry, deficient, excess ideas in Western, and we have similar thoughts in Ayurvedic. We have the same in Celtic. And so I was like, I don't know a lot about South America, but I bet you it's the same. And so I was really, really lucky that the folks that I got to visit down there, some of them didn't have electricity. They certainly didn't have cell phones. They couldn't Google it. They would know Google if it jumped up and bit them. And so it was really tough because it was sometimes translating three languages back and forth. And so it was like playing telephone with your friends in grade school. And the translation I know was always wrong. It's a longer story. But it was actually I was meeting with some Quechua midwives in Amupaquin that I was like, no, I'm going to insist. And I said, you have to say these exact words. And my entire interaction with the women there had shifted, because it was like, no, we think, the idea of wind evil is crazy talk, that evil spirits literally travel on the wind and they cause disease and sickness, and that's why we do diaphoretic. We release the exterior to get the evil wind out, right? Because otherwise, what the heck are you sweating for? What's that got to do with your immune system? And so we take that out of our modern language so often. And so these Quechua women were like, no, that's totally what we do. And then as I learned more and met with more people from that area and similar areas, they just have different funny words. So I find that all the cultures, although they have nuance and they use their bioregional herbs or their particular constructs of understanding of the world, they're all kind of the same. And so I find like I just need to create that and then pull what I think are the best out of each one. Yeah, psychedelics are a trip. So psychedelics are always a challenge. There is good argument that psychedelics have been a part of culture. Yeah, that's rough, man. Well, I was going to say, herbal medicine and spiritual medicine sometimes helps that stuff. I would say psychedelics have always been a part of culture. I think we can find many things through history can be linked back. Some of the in Salem witch trials, that there was an ergot outbreak that was a hallucinatory mold fungus that grew on, I forget whether it was the wheat or the corn, and that people were just tripping. And that looks all, possessed like. And we find that almost every culture, like in Mexico, there's a golden mushroom, I think. In South America, we've got ayahuasca and many other plants. We've got all of our psychedelic mushrooms here, the peyote. Literally, the list is endless. The amanita mushrooms, if they're fermented properly, but the for real shamans, the word shaman comes from Siberia, but we use it interchangeably to like cool people. No. Yes, I will. Amanda, I'm going to put this on YouTube, and I'll post this back on Facebook, or you can find it on the Tradition School of Herbal Studies YouTube page. And, and so there's definitely, it's funny, graffiti's been around. They found graffiti on the walls of Pompeii, thousands of years ago. Graffiti's everywhere. Porn has been around for as long as there's been humans. And people want to get drunk and high since the beginning of time. and and so part of, I think, the resurgence of that is, it's funny, a lot of people call it a spiritual awakening. I would say it's a spiritual loss. That because we feel disconnected, and obviously COVID made us feel horribly disconnected, that we sit inside and play on Facebook, sorry, and we don't, nobody knows how to have a conversation anymore, that we are literally devoid and we're looking for an answer. We're looking for that connection. It's a kind of a big circle around what we were talking about earlier. And it's funny, my brother just went on a trip to California and then Hawaii with his wife, and he lost his phone really early in his trip, and he was like, no, I did 20 days and like a total detox off of everything. And it's so funny, he's like, they came back home and they got, we all have bad habits, sit in front of the TV after dinner, whatever, and and a family unit, you sit there and watch TV, nobody's having a conversation. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody else. And so he was like, well, we're back home. I found my phone. I got a new phone. He was like, what do we do? He's like, if we actually break ourselves out of these habits, we got to do things like talk and have conversations. And I was like, and I think we lack that. That actual human connection, not just some voice in a picture on this magic box. And if we're feeling disconnected, and I, not to beat up on religion, but we have been, religion has had some challenges, and has been, people are no longer hold the faith in organized religion the way they used to, because organized religion has screwed up a lot, all of them. And we're finding that humans are fallible. And we've, just like we hold herbalists and doctors and priests and pastors and all that, we hold them all up on this weird pedestal that is probably unreasonable. And so we want to know that there's something more. And hallucinogens have been used for millennia for just that purpose. They've also been abused for just as long as we've known them. And so I find there are many different paths. If we talk about Buddha sitting under a tree and meditating, that didn't require hallucinations that we know of, but that was just a clarity of thought. And other people, like, pretty clearly, if we look at some religions, they're like, you were tripping. You're hearing some voices. Been there. And so, but then we've got people who are just, enjoying shrooms for entertainment. They're like, hey, let's go to the music festival and do a lot of shrooms. And I would argue that those lines get blurred too often. Really good friend of mine, super smart, super capable human. And when he's like, what's the path to enlightenment? What do I need to do? What book do I need to read? What mushroom do I need to take in order to be smarter than everybody else? And I was like, good luck with that. I was like, no, it's, you have to, and sorry, it goes back to you. You have to go back to a teacher, and not necessarily a specific lineage. You just need to have somebody help you guide and navigate being full of yourself, which is a little bit. And so I think it's important that we differentiate, I want to get high, or drunk or whatever, versus I'm going to use this as a medicine with a guide, a person guide, that will help me to move along my spiritual journey. And that can be, it's funny, ayahuasca is, all the rage now. And I find most people want to do it not because they're seeking an answer. They tried the other hallucinogens. They want to see how this one is. And so they want to compare. I did acid, I did DMT, I did some shrooms, I did, and I'm like, no, you just want to get high. And you can wrap that in whatever BS you want. Just say you want to get high. Like, my running joke is like, I like wine, you like mushroom, like whatever. Like, it's no big deal. And so I always find that some, like mushrooms, I think can be entertainment. Those are, go to a music concert, hang out with friends, go sit by a fire. It's enlightening, but it's not necessarily going to make you see God. Other things like ayahuasca, when I first learned about ayahuasca was 25 plus years ago. I was in Peru on the Amazon and was visiting with a number of different healers down there. And there, the shaman would drink the ayahuasca in order to get the message of what to give the patient. Now, all of the patients do a lot of ayahuasca, and the shaman does a little bit to help guide the ceremony. And it's funny, and some of that may be a cultural difference in the different ones that I saw, but it's an interesting shift of how do we use these things. And ultimately, all want the fast track, and I don't think there is one. One of the things that, yay, acupuncture school. I started studying herbs and edible plants and medicinal plants when I was like 8 or 10 years old, and lots of little offshoots along the way. But when I did the formal training with acupuncture school, like the idea that there was now a system for me to work under was fascinating. The idea of tongue and pulse diagnosis. I no longer need Western medicine to define what plants and what illnesses you have. And so all of us in school go, stick out your tongue, okay, it's whatever, and you take the pulse and you're like, okay, you got a pulse, and maybe you get fast or slow, strong or weak, which you're kicking ass if you're doing that. And I did the same thing. I was like, I don't understand the pulse. You got a pulse, cool. And as time went on, I was like, I don't care, I have to keep taking the pulse. Every time I see one of my clients, I have to take their pulse. And it's the only way you're going to learn. The first time you picked up a football, you weren't some football star, you had to practice. You have to practice. And so I still, like, even if I'm like, I've seen this person a million times, I know what they're going on, it probably never changes, I still take their pulse every single time. And what I find is about every 5 years, all of a sudden a light bulb goes off about pulse diagnosis, that I get a little bit better. And almost 25 years of pulse taking now, I see crazy ass stuff. And I don't even know what word to put on it, but I can come up with an understanding of what it feels like and what that translates to into the system. And it's funny, I got here a little while ago, and I was sitting there texting back and forth with Eva, one of the other acupuncturists at the clinic. She was like, I think I just felt a parasite in somebody's pulse. And she's like, I know you've talked about that before. What did it feel like? And it was like, felt like there was a little thing swimming in the bloodstream there. And then in my case, it like literally felt like it stuck its head up and went, oh shit, he sees me, and went back down and vanished. And she's like, oh my God, that's exactly what it felt like. And she's like, what do I do? What do I call that in the notes? And I was like, I don't know, make something up. And so the reality is that, there isn't an end point on any of this. It is a journey that will last as long as you want to stick with it, and as many lifetimes as you want to stick with it if you go there. And there are shortcuts to give you faith in it, but there's no shortcuts to grasping it. And so, like, ayahuasca is more powerful than most people want, and I've also gone with David Winston and done ceremony where you fast and you don't do any hallucinogens. You fast for 5 days. You do ceremony, jokingly breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which I didn't find funny. I was starving, and you hallucinate, and it is as powerful, if not more so, than doing ayahuasca. So I don't think there's anything wrong with playing with hallucinogens. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying to find your tribe. But too often it's a bunch of crap. And I hate to say it, in those circles, because people are altered and they're, back to you, Ephraim, there isn't a lineage sometimes, and there isn't a code of ethics, if you will, that allows for people to feel safe. And so I hear of way too many people who are assaulted while pursuing psychedelics, and it's kind of creepy. So I discourage most people, especially with ayahuasca, but with all of them. There's way too many people out there putting on their shaman hat and pretending to be predators, and so it kind of creeps me out. Literally, I bet you once every 2 months, I hear of another person who's been preyed upon in any number of different ways. All right, get rid of this heavy shit. Let's get something boring. Solanaceae, yay, poison. Even get. So yeah, actually, so Solanaceae's family is the nightshade family, and I would say every plant is spiritual. Every plant is a nootropic when it's paired right with the individual, and how you utilize that plant. But we do find the Solanaceae's plant family is got a poison that many people can't process. So it causes a wide range of inflammatory conditions on, I'm finding, a growing number of people. And so we look at foods, potatoes, tomatoes, not just green. Everybody says green peppers, all peppers, potato, eggplant, and goji berries, ground cherries, and the native plant here, ashwagandha. One that people always forget, tobacco. Tobacco is a nightshade. And I always wonder, we all have that relative who was chain smoking tobacco until he was 95 and died from climbing a mountain. And then we see people at 30 years old that are keeling over with horrible lung cancers and so forth. And I always wonder, and I've never seen research on this. I've always wondered if there are folks who are sensitive to the solanaceae, but they get hooked on nicotine and tobacco, and that they're getting sick fast because it's more inflammatory from them rather than the tobacco farmer in North Carolina. And we do, like, ashwagandha is a very mild, not psychoactive, but a relaxing herb. It is so there is a spiritual aspect to some of those. And there's an aspect of any time we do a poison plant that there's a little adrenaline rush. There's a little, we see the angel's trumpet and devil's trumpet, that they let you see death. So we have people who are daredevils who we do risky behaviors in order to challenge death, and it creates a thrill that they feel a closer connection to something powerful, or they feel empowered by it. And I've been guilty of that in the past, and I have the arthritis to prove it. And so I think there's a desire to test fate with potentially dangerous plants. Like, why do kids experiment with tobacco, when they're preteens or teens? Why do they, drugs are bad, don't do drugs. Everybody freaking smoked some weed at some point in their life and decided whether or not they want to play with it. And so there is a overcoming your fears are oftentimes a part of that shamanic path, if you will, of feeling whole and complete with yourself. Is that, like, how do I face scary stuff? So yeah, poison stuff, solanaceae frequently being some level of toxicity with those. Man, I lost place. I got more notes. I think I caught up with everybody. If not, feel like I only got a small scroll here and I missed some of it as I'm like in my own head thinking. It's always so if I didn't answer any of your questions, like, retype it or shout it out, whatever.
Talk about Vitex.
Vitex. Whoa. So there's so much to say about Vitex. Um, so Vitex, sorry, off my screen there. Sorry, I was relaxing. I was like, okay, what the hell do I say about Vitex? Um, so there are some imposters. So there is the Vitex that we use to raise progesterone levels. That's the herb of commerce. We have some other plants that are called Vitex that are probably the same genus, different species, that don't have that reproductive approach or benefit to it. There's a Chinese herb that is Vitex negundo, which is Lachishang? No. Ah, crap, I forget the name. I haven't talked about that one in ages. Negundo, which is a Vitex. The berry looks very different and the plant looks very different and doesn't seem to have any hormonal effect, reproductive effect whatsoever. Here in Florida, we have a native Vitex that is beach Vitex. It's sometimes the one that's sold in the stores here. I've not seen it have the same effect. We grow both of them out here. The smell's different. The leaf looks the same. The seed looks the same. The flower's similar in its appearance. The smell's different. I find the beach Vitex, and I forget the Latin name for it, sorry. The beach Vitex is very acrid and kind of musty smelling, and the flowers are not that nice. They're pretty, but they don't smell good. The Vitex that we use for progesterone, the herb of commerce, I think is just divine. Like the flowers on that, like literally, you just want to hug them. The bees just swarm all over them, and so I think it's all the Vitexes that I've seen, whether it's Negundo, the beach Vitex, are used for medicine, but I think it's important to investigate their use in their local bioregional cultural construct. When we see the herb of commerce and the monk's pepper, it's funny. It was originally monk's pepper to keep the monks from getting frisky. That's been debunked. that does not do that. It does have an excellent role in progesterone, and I find that it has an excellent role as an antispasmodic. I'm going to have a fun big circle here, and obviously menstrual stuff, especially when they're either the progesterone. I don't have my cool books, but you can make some correlations between the menstrual cycle and which hormones are peaking when. And so we see a temperature change. We say we see that actually very dramatic temperature changes that you can track what hormones are doing what and where you are in your cycle. Vaginal secretions, the stickiness and the amount will change through the cycle. And so when somebody's having either menstrual pain, infertility, we can use what's called the BBT, the basal body temperature. Not Huangjing. Oh, Huangjingzi. No, is it? I'm not sure, John. That doesn't sound right. Manjingzi. That's it. Huangjingzi is the Solomon seal. So we can use the basal body temperature, the BBT, in order to track the cycle and see where things are peaking. And there's a very specific time, like your temperature should go up about X% at this time in your cycle. It should drop here. So you can chart that out either based on cool energetics, or you can do it based on Western medicine. And we can use the Vitex in order to move that progesterone level where we need it to, and then drop off, kind of the same way that you do with birth control pills. That progesterone is oftentimes in there, trying to do that. But we also see that things like progesterone cream helps with sleep, and it can help with muscle spasm. And so I have not seen Vitex work as well for sleep. but as an anti-anxiety, a little bit of benefit, but a lot of intestinal and uterine spasms.
Mm.
That it's a helpful at helping to modify those and ultimately getting it back in balance.
Okay.
I totally forget what the manjingsa, the Nagundo, is used for. I never use it. The beach Vitex, interestingly enough, is used for arthritis, I believe. And so joints versus intestines, muscles, and uterus. So different tissues that they're affecting. And I think the more intense smell of the beach Vitex, and just because I haven't worked with it enough, probably is more for weather-related pain than it is for spasmy kind of pain or hot pain. That's just a guess there on the beach Vitex on it. The trick to Vitex, though, I see the biggest mistake people take is they do it every day through their entire cycle, as opposed to dosing it specifically for where we need to increase the progesterone.
I think the birds in here. I think.
We have critters.
Okay.
It's a problem.
Aw. But I'm pretty sure Ruthie, she was saying that the Vitex on some people could have an effect when, for the PMS symptoms, physically
Yeah.
has a good effect. It's half or more than half people who
Yeah.
actually can bring on bad emotional effects.
Yeah, and that's the problem of like, people say Vitex is good for hormones.
Yeah.
No, only, I mean, it's never as easy to say it's just for this,
Yeah.
but we do know it for real affects the progesterone, and so if you have too much progesterone, now you're just gonna piss them off.
Yeah.
And so I like when you're working with menstrual stuff, in its big bold thing of anything from pain to PMS to PMDD to infertility, you name it. It's better to especially with infertility. I always say like, nope, figure out this BBT thing, and I'll talk about that in a second. But then like either do good energetic diagnosis, or we need. It's so funny. Like you can go to your gynecologist, and they're like, "We'll test your hormones." For guys, that's fine. For a woman to test the hormones on one day is the stupidest thing I ever heard.
Yeah.
Like every day, your cycle is changing in different, the follicle stimulating, the luteinizing hormones, the progesterone, estrogen, all of those are changing every single day as you cycle through there, and there's no knowledge to be gained from a single day, and so that always pisses me off.
That's what's lost all over the internet. Everyone's like, test your hormones.
Yeah.
I understand. I don't get it
Yeah, and BBT is probably one of the better ways to do it, and it usually takes 3 cycles of consistency with it. With the BBT, so it's not perfect, but usually you change ovaries. So like this month it's this ovary, next month it's this one. Sometimes it's this one twice and this one once, and so sometimes the problems are, there's holding up ovaries and uteri and there's lots of ligaments and tendons and fascia. All this stuff is like keeping that stuff from falling down. And so if, because of exercise, because of shit happens, you were born that way, something's twisted or contracted or lax, you get a dip, and that over time reduces blood flow or chi or whatever, causes a dysfunction in one ovary. So it's not firing right, or for some reason that then affects luteinizing hormone. Then we have to figure out which one it is and where it screwed up on that cycle. And so doing that 3 cycles with the basal body temperature can sometimes find like, oh, here's where the hiccup is that's causing bad things to happen. And then
you can tell with that which one.
Yeah.
With the
And
temperature.
I don't have it here. There's a chart. If you search for basal body temperature, chart, and like Google, you'll see it. It'll actually have where you are in your cycle, what the ovary's doing with the release of the oocyte, plus what hormones are doing what, plus the temperature, and you can watch this whole 28-day chart as it goes through. It's a fascinating chart, and then if you're really crazy, you throw Chinese medicine on top of that, and the whole yin yang. It's super cool.
Yeah.
And so there's apps for the BBT to make your life easy, but the trick to it is, and whether you use this kind of thermometer or this kind of thermometer, doesn't matter, is to do it before you get out of bed. So the second you wake up, literally like one eye open, reach over, stick the thermometer in your mouth, and write it down. The second you sit up or you go to pee, your body temperature will regulate to its normal, whatever that is. And so as you chart it out, you'll be able to connect the dots. And if you miss one, it doesn't matter. You can actually add to that. It's more information if you're working with an herbalist to put, like, if it was really stressful, very emotional, if you went out drinking this night, ignore this one. Also, bowel movements will change. Like, usually if your hormones, your temperature should drop off right, literally like the moments before you start bleeding. And so that drop in temperature will frequently trigger loose stools. And so to have a bout of diarrhea right, like literally, oh, and I started, is kind of normal. But if it drops too low, that's a problem. Or if it doesn't drop at all, that's an issue. So that will oftentimes really help clarify where the issue is, and which ovary is sometimes the issue, and then just finding the right combination. Frequently when we're looking at, and usually it's pretty easy, like, oh, here's just some stress herbs, and most people's cycle just gets normal.
Yeah.
It's literally that easy more often than not. But sometimes it's not. And sometimes it's way harder. And especially if somebody is trying to get pregnant. And, if you've not been trying to not get pregnant for a year, that's considered infertility. So you should be like actively trying, like if you're having sex, if you're having a menses, and you're not using any kind of birth control, you should get pregnant if you're having regular sex. And if you add to that, like looking at that ovulatory window of like, here's my 7-day or 3-day, depending on how you do it, window of opportunity to get pregnant, and it ain't happening, then like, all right, something broke. And it could be the guy or it could be the woman. So I always encourage people, it's faster to go to a fertility specialist and get all the fancy blood work. I won't say I insist, but I strongly encourage the guy gets checked out as well, because fertility rates are going down dramatically in men, and plastic pollution, choose your poison. And so there's a lot of herbs that we can use specifically to increase sperm counts, to change the pH. If there are lots of misshapen heads, the viscosity is wrong, herbs and supplements can help dramatically with that to really good success. For women, at the very least, we oftentimes will look at from the stop of bleeding to ovulation, one formula, and then from ovulation to the start of bleeding. And then sometimes if they're having horrible, painful menstrual cramps, we need something just for when they're having them, some, breakthrough, ow, this sucks. And in that, and again, it depends. Like most people, if they're having some infertility, they're having fertility issues, just dividing the menses in half is sufficient. Couple of cycles kicks ass. Occasionally, we have to actually break it up into 4 cycles plus bleeding time. And that just gets fancier. It's like, nope, wait. And Chinese explains this better. If you lose blood, you're like, now you're you're a pint low. It's not a pint, it's a tablespoon low, but whatever. And so we generally nourish the blood from the stop of bleeding for about 7 days, 5 to 7 days. Then we nourish the qi for the next, and now we're at ovulation, and then we start to move the qi for the first week after ovulation, And then right before the start of menses, we start to move the blood that helps for a clear cycle. And so a little bit more complex. Every once in a while I have to go there. It's a pain in the ass for everybody involved because I got to figure that out.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I see a lot of that kind of idea like on the internet of like young people, and it's like they're eating certain foods for this chunk of time and this
yeah,
chunk, this
oh
chunk, this
yeah.
chunk, and that's like a whole big thing.
I just like
And seeds, certain seeds used for seeds.
I had somebody recently who did that. I was like, their exercise routine would change, and I was like, that's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, I never like I'd only seen that in Chinese medicine, specifically using the herbs, but the idea that our behaviors should change based on that, I thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
I, it's funny, and to make it more clinical, one of the ways that guys, for whatever reason, it's not my fault, I'm perfect, right? And so they're very, the guys are getting better, but that they feel unmanly if they can't, if it's their fault. And so one of the ways I oftentimes sucker the guy in is I don't have any children, but if I were to have a child, I want the perfect super child, right? And so the idea that how much preparation can we do to make sure that we have the healthiest egg and sperm that has the least inflammation, that doesn't have damaged DNA, and so that takes a couple of months of preparation to make sure that you make a super baby. And so for guys it's 3 months. I think for women I usually look for 6 months to a year of preparation. And it can be as simple as take some vitamin C, but usually I get a little bit fancier than that. And I'll end it on more Bob crazy talk. As long as we're going there, and at some point I go off on this crazy tangent in class, don't worry. That when we look at for make sure you have your kids before 35, because after that your risk of birth defects goes up exponentially, and it does. Like, that's a real thing. Except not every women are having children later and later in life, and not every single woman who has a child at 40 has some messed up kid. Like, there's lots of normal, healthy folks who are doing that. And it's fascinating. So there is your chronological age, like, hey, I was born on this day, this is how old I am. It's woohoo. And then there's your genetic age. And that is a new thing that's come out as they were doing the genome project and all that they look at the telomeres. And so it's the end of the chromosome, and the length of that telomere on the end determines your genetic age. So the longer the telomere, the younger you are. And so age kind of like wears it away. I worked with a functional medicine doc back in the day, and I sat in on all the trainings, and I was like, that's amazing. And I equated that to the idea of essence or jing, right? Because the running joke is, although we have the 5 excesses in Chinese, it's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The more we burn the candle at both ends, the more we're kind of reducing our predetermined time on the planet. And if we overburn it, we don't do it pretty. If we nourish ourselves and so forth, we do it in style. And so I actually we were doing more fertility in the clinic back in the day, and I actually encouraged people who could afford it. It was like $200 or something, to, especially if they were having either difficulty getting pregnant, or they were hitting that 30s mark, and some people look great at 40. Some people look like they got hit by a truck at 40, and that may be a measure of their jing, their essence. And so that genetic test, I have some older folks who are testing at 25. And there's certain herbs that we can use in order to re-lengthen the telomere. And so it's really funny. Vitamin C reduces inflammation, so our inflammatory load probably has an impact on that. The other thing was astragalus, Huangqi in Chinese. And so there was a product being sold, TA65, that they were charging like $50-$60 for like a month's supply that is guaranteed to make you live forever and lengthen your telomeres and I was like, it took me the longest time. Like, I went to their website trying to figure it out, and I was like, it's just astragalus.
Oh, wow.
And so I had one of my patients. He was, I think he's like lived forever. He's in a wheelchair. Had oh my God, what did he have? Yeah, some childhood disease, and outlived 2 wives, and like ate everything wrong. And he had some 90-year-old told him that this TA65 will make you live forever. That's why I'm alive, and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, well, you can take that. I'll sell you this for like $20. It's probably better than the crap you're taking.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he's still alive, but he was still kicking 6 months ago, and he was taking his TA65. He'd forget everything else. He'd remember to do that.
Oh my gosh.
And so I would argue that a formula based on your imbalances, your patterns, rather than just like, oh, I did lab tests on rats to see what astragalus and vitamin C does, I would say, if we know that, that's great. Let's incorporate all of these tools of other ways of seeing imbalances. That was one way of seeing an imbalance, that we can bring about a better genetic age on somebody. And that's kind of the whole idea of what our medicine does. We see imbalances. We can call that genetic you can label it any way you want. We see imbalances. We try to correct the balance, and you'll live a better life with that, at least from that physical, energetic sense. And the magic is, how do you recognize this crap? MDs do it with blood work and imaging. We do it through asking a crap ton of questions and looking at tongues and pulses, and there are many paths to understanding those unique imbalances, and many paths on how we correct it. Here's your meds, here's your food, here's your herbs, here's your supplements. Take your choice. Here's your exercise. Here's your meditation, and usually we mix and match. Like, none of us eat perfect all the time, so sometimes we try to do other things that improve that a little bit. All right. I gotta shut up now. I know we're all tired. My brain hurts. That was my download for this month. If you don't know, I'm Bob Linde from the Acupuncture and Herbal Therapies, the Tradition School of Herbal Studies. You can find the recording of this on, that stuff. On not on Facebook, on YouTube, Tradition School of Herbal Studies. We got a crap ton of classes coming up, so I hope you come to some of our free and not free class. Oh, I didn't mention the free class, the culinary herbalism. So somebody who graduated from Paul Bergner's program out west, and I'm a huge fan of Paul Bergner. And I will say that class is filling up like gangbusters. I don't know if we have room for more in person. But she's just written a book on using food and herbs together in all kinds of cool ways, and I'm excited to see what she's doing. But I think we've got over 30 people signed up for that, so everybody should come to that, or at least join us online. But bonus in person, I think we're probably going to, we're making sure it's okay with her to take the tables down so we can put more chairs in here. So I hope we see you next month, or at the conference, or in a class, or in the clinic. Bye. How do I turn this thing off? Oh my God. There we go.